action is a topic which has often seemed right at the very edge of science, almost inaccessible to scientific inquiry. I'd like to talk about some ways that we might begin to study scientifically this really important aspect of who we are and of our individual autonomy. First, we need to begin with a definition of voluntary action, or I would say a definition of volition. We can use the word volition to mean the mental state and brain state which allows us to make voluntary actions. But it's actually quite difficult to come up with a good definition of voluntary action. In our everyday lives, we know that we mean because we think that we can do what we want. We can decide on what we do, and our actions are up to us. I feel like going to eat pizza. I will just go and eat pizza. And that's fine. It was my decision. But when we try to look at the problem scientifically about what exactly this means, it becomes quite a lot harder. There are different traditions of defining volition. The tradition of neuroscience is quite rigorous in some ways, but unsatisfactory in others. In neuroscience, traditionally, people have distinguished between actions, which are reactions or responses to an external stimulus, and actions, which are internally generated, such as voluntary action. My decision that I'm just going to eat pizza, that's up to me. It's internally generated. It's something that I decided to do, whereas a reaction would be an action, which is triggered by some immediate, obvious, direct external stimulus. The classic example of reaction is a reflex. If the doctor taps on my knee with a tendon hammer and evokes a movement of my leg, then that's a reflex response because it seems as though there is nothing more in the action than there was in the stimulus. But quite a lot of our actions don't seem like that. They seem to go beyond the immediate stimulus information. It seems as though something inside me is adding the information about what to do, where to go, what the decision should be, and translating that into action. That is interesting because it puts volition and voluntary action almost the opposite end of the Pavlov tradition, which trend to see all of our action as being responses and environmental stimuli, but it's unsatisfactory because it doesn't say what volition is. It just says what is not. So, voluntary action is not a response to a stimulus. But then, what is the cause of it? Where does it come from? What is the cause of voluntary action? In philosophy, they have an answer. In philosophy, they have an answer to that question. They say that voluntary action is an action which we make for a reason. So the test in philosophy for volition is, can you ask a why question? Why did you do that? Why did you eat the pizza? Wait ako na dyan. Why did you do that? Why did you eat pizza? Why did you cross the road? And that's quite tricky for us to study in the laboratory. It's quite tricky for us to generate the reasons for autonomous action in a laboratory setting. In a laboratory, we can give people motivation to act. For example, we can say, would you rather press this button and earn 1 pound or press this button and earn 2 pounds? But somehow, that doesn't seem to be very voluntary because everybody is going to choose the button that gets them 2 pounds. It seems as though it's the stimulus, it's the association with the value which is driving the action. So it's very, very tricky to think of situation which allows us to test this up to me. Quality in the laboratory, and that has been the tricky point about the history of studying volition scientifically. The field really developed largely by finding new ways to measure the process The field really developed largely by finding new ways to measure the processes in the brain that occur when we do make decisions that are up to us. It has not had so much success in trying to engineer or control the different ways that we can manipulate the situation and get people to make voluntary decisions. In 1965, Konhuber and Dickey in Freiburg, Germany, were able to record a potential, an electrical activity, by placing electrodes on the scalp. They found that before a voluntary action, there was a reliable gradual increase in brain activity which they called the readiness potential because they were working in German. This activity seemed to come from the frontal areas of the brain, just in front of the motor cortex, which we actually use to move, and it seems to build up a gradual electrical potential around a second or so before a person made a voluntary action. The instruction that they gave to their participant was to press a button whenever they feel like it. Not when I tell you, but when they want to. That is quite a strange instruction, which people sometimes find quite hard to understand. But let's imagine that they just occasionally make an action, without any stimulus telling them to do so. The readiness potential seems to be something like the build-up of preparation in the brain as the person gets ready, go, and press the button. So we now believe that we have a biomarker which can show us the emergence of voluntary action. But we have not had very good ways of understanding why this biomarker begins. Why does the person decide to press the button now rather than 1 or 2 or 3 seconds later? We recently published a paper in which we tried to address this question of what are the reasons for a voluntary action using a slightly surprising task. In our task, we told people that they should watch the screen and they should wait until the dots that they could see on the screen started to move either to the left or to the right. If they move to the left, press the left button. If they move to the right, press the right button. But you might have to wait a very, very long time before the dots start to move. You might just stare at the screen for up to 2 minutes, waiting for the dots to move. That's really boring. And if you get bored waiting, you can skip to the next trial by pressing both the left and the right buttons simultaneously. The critical thing is that the action of pressing the left and the right button simultaneously is not a response to the stimulus. There are no dots moving on the screen telling you to press the left or the right button. It's up to you to decide. Now I'm going to press the button because I'm bored of waiting to the dots. I'm going to get to the next trial. So that is the reason that is an action that is not stimulus driven. It's an action which is voluntary in the classic neuropsychological sense because it's not a reaction to any stimulus in the external world. It is an action that I make because I want to.